The video call was arranged through a humanitarian organization that specialized in connecting Palestinian athletes with international mentors. But when Ronaldo first saw 19-year-old Mahmoud al-Rashid appear on his computer screen from a rehabilitation center in Gaza, he was struck not by what was missing from the young man's body. His left leg had been amputated below the knee after being injured in a bombing 6 months earlier, but by the intensity and determination in his eyes that reminded Ronaldo of his own expression in mirrors during the most challenging periods of his career, when injury or setback had threatened to derail his dreams. Mahmoud was sitting on his hospital bed with a football balanced on his lap, and when he smiled and said in careful English, "Mr. Ronaldo, thank you for talking to me. I know you are very busy, but I wanted to show you that Palestinian football is still alive, even when they try to destroy our bodies." His voice carried a combination of respect and defiance that immediately captured Ronaldo's attention and made him understand that this conversation would be different from the usual charitable video calls he participated in with young fans around the world. The story that Mahmoud told over the next hour was simultaneously heartbreaking and inspiring, beginning with his childhood in Gaza, where he had been identified as exceptional football talent at age 8, when his speed, ball control, and tactical understanding had marked him as someone who might someday play professionally, perhaps even internationally, if circumstances had allowed for the kind of development opportunities that young players in other parts of the world took for granted. Despite the limitations imposed by the ongoing blockade, which restricted access to quality equipment, training facilities, and international competition, Mahmoud had continued to excel throughout his teenage years. Representing Gaza in regional tournaments and dreaming of earning a scholarship to study and play football in Europe, where he believed his talents could be properly developed and where he might eventually play at the highest levels of the sport that had defined his identity since childhood. The bombing that changed everything had occurred on a Tuesday morning in March, when Mahmoud was walking to training with his teammate and best friend Youssef. And what he remembered most clearly was not the explosion itself, but the moment of silence that followed, when he found himself lying on the ground, unable to feel his left leg, while dust and debris fell around them, and Youssef, who had been walking just 2 steps behind him, was calling his name in a voice that sounded very far away, even though he was right there beside him. The medical care that followed had been complicated by the limited resources available in Gaza's overwhelmed healthcare system, where doctors and nurses were doing their best to treat multiple trauma cases with equipment and supplies that would have been considered inadequate for minor injuries in most other parts of the world. But the surgical team had managed to save Mahmoud's life while amputating his leg in a procedure that was performed without some of the pain management and rehabilitation support that would have been standard in better equipped facilities. What impressed Ronaldo most about Mahmoud's story was not the details of his injury or recovery, devastating as they were, but his immediate determination to return to football despite the obvious challenges of playing at a competitive level with a prosthetic leg, and his refusal to accept that his dreams were over simply because his body had been changed by circumstances beyond his control. The first thing I asked when I woke up after surgery was whether I could still play football, Mahmoud told Ronaldo, and when the doctor said it would be very difficult, I told him that difficult is not the same as impossible, and that I had been dealing with difficult my whole life, so this was just one more challenge to overcome. Within 3 months of his amputation, Mahmoud had taught himself to walk with a prosthetic leg and had begun experimenting with modifications that would allow him to run and change direction effectively, working with a local mechanic who had no experience with prosthetics, but who understood mechanical engineering and was willing to help design adaptive equipment that might restore some of Mahmoud's athletic capability. The breakthrough had come when they developed a specialized prosthetic foot with adjustable studs that provided better traction and stability on grass surfaces, combined with a socket design that allowed for the quick pivoting movements that were essential to Mahmoud's playing style. innovations that had attracted attention from international prosthetics manufacturers who were interested in adapting their designs for other amputee athletes around the world. When Mahmoud demonstrated his current abilities by standing up and juggling the football with his good leg while maintaining perfect balance on his prosthetic, Ronaldo was amazed not just by the technical skill involved, but by the joy and naturalness with which Mahmoud moved, as if the artificial leg had become so integrated into his sense of his own body that it no longer represented a limitation, but simply a different way of expressing the same athletic gifts that had always defined him. "I want to show you something else," Mahmoud said, and he began describing his work with other amputee athletes in Gaza, including children who had lost limbs to unexploded ordnance or building collapses, and how he had started an informal training program to help them develop football skills adapted to their specific physical situations. Believing that sport could provide not just physical rehabilitation, but also psychological healing and social connection for young people who might otherwise feel isolated or hopeless about their futures. The program had grown from Mahmoud working with 2 other amputees in his neighborhood to a network of 30 athletes of various ages and injury types who met regularly to train, compete in modified tournaments, and support each other through the ongoing challenges of life in Gaza, where access to proper prosthetics, medical follow-up, and adaptive sports equipment remained severely limited by import restrictions and economic constraints. What moved Ronaldo most deeply was Mahmoud's description of how football had become a form of resistance for these athletes. Not political resistance, but existential resistance. A refusal to allow their circumstances to define the limits of their dreams, or to accept that their value as human beings had been diminished by their injuries, and a determination to prove that talent, dedication, and love of sport could transcend any barrier that others might try to impose. When people see us playing football, they remember that we are not just victims or patients or problems to be solved, Mahmoud explained. We are athletes. We are young people with dreams and abilities. We are human beings who deserve the same opportunities to develop our talents and compete at the highest levels that athletes everywhere else in the world expect as their right. The conversation continued for 2 hours, far longer than originally planned, as Ronaldo found himself drawn into discussions about adaptive training techniques, the psychology of overcoming physical limitations, and the broader role that sport could play in healing communities that had experienced trauma. Topics that connected to his own experiences with injury recovery and his growing understanding of football's power to inspire hope and create connections across cultural and political divides. When the call finally ended, Ronaldo immediately contacted his foundation and authorized the establishment of a specialized program to support amputee athletes in conflict zones, beginning with Gaza but designed to expand to other regions where young people had lost limbs to war, terrorism, or unexploded ordnance, providing not just financial support for prosthetics and equipment, but also training resources, competition opportunities, and pathways to international athletic programs that could help exceptional athletes achieve their full potential, regardless of their physical circumstances. 3 months later, Mahmoud received a package containing state-of-the-art prosthetics designed specifically for football, along with training equipment for his entire program and an invitation to attend a specialized camp in Spain, where he could work with adaptive sports specialists and potentially earn consideration for international adaptive football competitions. Opportunities that would have been unimaginable before his conversation with Ronaldo, but which suddenly seemed achievable through the combination of his own determination and support from people who believed in his potential. The most significant outcome, however, was the ongoing friendship that developed between Ronaldo and Mahmoud, who began having regular video calls where they discussed not just football techniques and career development, but also life philosophy, the meaning of perseverance, and the responsibility that comes with having platforms that can inspire others. Conversations that changed both men's understanding of what it means to be an athlete and what sports can accomplish beyond entertainment and personal achievement. When Mahmoud eventually made the Palestinian national amputee football team and scored the winning goal in their victory over Jordan, Ronaldo was watching online from his home in Madrid, and he posted a video congratulating Mahmoud with the caption, "This is what champions look like. Not defined by what they've lost, but by what they refuse to give up, and proving every day that the most important victories happen when people said winning was impossible." Years later, when Mahmoud established his own foundation to support young amputee athletes throughout the Middle East and North Africa, he credited his conversation with Ronaldo as the moment when he realized that his injury, rather than ending his football career, had actually expanded it into something larger and more meaningful than individual athletic achievement, because it had connected him to a global community of athletes who understood that true success in sport comes not from avoiding challenges, but from demonstrating that no challenge is insurmountable when met with proper support, determination, and the belief that every person deserves the chance to pursue their dreams, regardless of the obstacles they face.